This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Repay. Repay offers omni-channel integrated payment solutions for Acumatica users. Whether you are making B2B payments or collecting them, Repay is your full-service payments provider. Power up your payments to empower your business and accelerate the AP and AR payment flow through one seamless integration. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Velixo. Velixo is an award-winning provider of Excel-based reporting solutions for Acumatica. With Velixo, you can build financial, project, and other business reports in Excel with live Acumatica data in just a few minutes and get the answers you need. If you know Excel, you can do it. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. Guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, February 25th, 2022, and this is episode number 72. Tom Fahres reflecting on Acumatica Summit 2022 and implementation methodology. Tom, thanks for taking the time to come on today. I'll let you start off by introducing yourself, who you are, who you work for, and what you do there.
Great. Thanks, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor, frankly, to have a frank discussion with Tim Rodman. So Tom Fahres, I am currently the Acumatica practice manager at Martin & Associates. They are an Acumatica VAR, have been so for 5 or 6 years. They also have a fairly strong GP base and a Sage 100 base. Yeah. So
awesome. And that's a fairly recent thing, right? You were somewhere else before that, if I remember correctly.
Correct. I was with DSD Business Systems based out of San Diego. The entire time I've been based from my home office here in Denver, in my home. And I've actually worked for one other Acumatica partner as well.
Okay, cool. Well, what if we even drill back a little bit further? Let's get the somewhat brief version of Tom's origin story. Like, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school, like college, if you did? And where did you start off? And then how did you turn the corner into ERP?
Gotcha. Very good question. So born and raised San Francisco Bay Area, north of the Golden Gate Bridge, a little town called Corte Madera, and went to UC Davis, studied civil engineering there. And if you asked me about software or code or ERPs, I would have scratched my head at the time. My first job out of school was actually with a database marketing firm that needed someone with an engineer's skills for just basically pivot tables and access databases. So I could do that while I'm looking for an engineering job. And that got me started on a slippery slope of database marketing, then CRM. I worked for a number of years for a database marketing firm that I helped found. Worked for Equifax, kind of my first publisher / data, really large enterprise data services company, got into managing professional services teams there. I moved to another publicly traded company, Blackbaud, who deals with enterprise ERP, CRM, and e-commerce platform deployments for the likes of Salvation Army, Feeding America, Junior Achievement, really large nonprofits. And then someone asked me about ERPs and said, well, I've got to know a bunch of ERPs because I had to build integrations to basically the accounts receivable end of a very large nonprofit. So I'd seen Great Plains and come across Acumatica and encountered Solomon and Sage 100. So it was really a project management and implementation comfort that led me to ERPs. So I'm non-standard. I didn't come from a CPA background. I didn't come from computer science background. Instead, I kind of came from the implementation of large software platforms. And that's how I got into ERP, really Acumatica and Acumatica only. I never got certified in NetSuite or anything else. So I know only Acumatica as far as an ERP, and that's been kind of a blessing.
I've heard the name Blackbaud. I always thought that was an ERP. It sounds like, is it more of a billing software and then you interface to an ERP?
They do have an ERP offering. Yeah. Their strong suit is in fundraising. And so fundraising looks like, to the business world, an e-commerce platform. And then it does a bunch of things that really don't translate very well. They are accounts receivable in the form of grant applications and disbursements, major gift solicitations. But what is a solicitation? It's really like a potential to earn revenue. So again, I consider it a very large accounts receivable process, but it's not a true ERP. So most of those really large nonprofits, the Salvation Army, Feeding America, they will typically have this Blackbaud front end for donation management and e-commerce and receivables and grants, but they'll often back end it with a full ERP. So we came across SAP, Oracle, GP, Acumatica, Infor, all the usual ERP suspects. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, I didn't realize that. That makes sense. I like your description of it too, as more like an e-commerce platform. It's a front end.
Yeah, and if you Google, to be fair, if you Googled Blackbaud, you would find something called the Financial Edge. It's not a very good ERP, frankly.
Gotcha.
And I don't have any non-compete or anything like that, so I can badmouth them a little bit.
Well, I love stuff like that on the show.
Right.
So I like your point about the engineering background too. I think a lot of people might look at engineering / computer science. I know, like at UCLA where I was, it's the same school, but it is very different kind of mindsets. I think computer science is more binary. You're dealing with zeros and ones in the computer world, and a lot of times it's just about getting the right answer. Whereas I find an engineering philosophy is more of you're not thinking like a program. You're more just trying to understand how something is constructed, and it's more of a break things down into their pieces kind of a mindset. Would you say that's a fair kind of difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that with engineering, you do have to take into account physical considerations that maybe a computer science engineer wouldn't have to. Like, you were concerned about wind load or snow load, and the randomness of people, how they can maybe a staircase would get loaded differently if the staircase was outside and there was a concert. Like, we never designed the staircase for 1,000 people to be standing on it all at once. So yeah, there's definitely some analytics. There's risk management is a big part of engineering. And these things play out well. I think they translate really well, if not directly, to software implementation. That you conduct risk analysis in a large implementation with lots of moving parts, and then you want to be transparent about those risks. Yeah, so I have enjoyed applying a bunch of the engineering skills and things we learned to software implementation. Yeah, I think it's well put.
And I think it's kind of, you seem to have almost two major transitions so far. One is going from engineering into software implementations, and
Mhm.
two is going from software implementations narrowing further into ERP specifically. Maybe talk
Right.
about those two different transitions, and did you even realize that was happening at the time, or what made you, want to go into that next step? What was interesting to you? What caught your attention?
Yeah, the first one was more practical in that how did why was an engineering graduate interested in database marketing? Um, Database marketing was kind of taking off in dating myself here, the early 90s, and using analysis techniques, marketing automation platforms that were just getting started, and an engineer's background in databases just to manage analysis was valuable. Um,
And what is database marketing? Does that just mean
mm,
marketing, gathering data about people and storing it rather than just blasting out and hoping for the best?
it's all of the above. So there's still a lot of blasting, or there certainly was back then. Even email. This was actually in the early 90s, was still direct mail as the primary channel. Email was kind of fledgling at the time. Um, so at its most basic, it would be your product or service is we should be mailing into the C-suite of companies over a certain size. Where do we get lists like that? We go to sources like Dun and Bradstreet, um, and other industry sources, Forbes magazine subscription list, and we run deduplicate programs and other modeling programs and narrow 100,000 potential recipients down to the best 10,000 recipients, because each recipient costs $1 to send this fancy glossy direct mail
Okay.
piece. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
database marketing, and it's tracking that in a repeatable way and building the systems that actually help one customer inform what we'll do for the next customer who's in the same, they're a competitor, but we'll actually use the intel we've gained about how well the Forbes mailing list performs for that particular industry, and we'll apply that to the next customer that we're doing database marketing work for.
That's interesting. There's a guy I sat next to on a plane probably about 5 years ago. Can't remember his name right now. Can't remember the company, but he was describing that Dun and Bradstreet list to me, and his company went a little further. He was targeting B2B only, I think, and
Sure.
then he also filtered out anyone who spent less than, I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was like less than 10,000 a year on IT. So he was specifically looking for
Yeah.
companies that spent more than 10 grand on IT. And then they went wider than Dun and Bradstreet, collecting, I don't know what it was, 500 to 1,000 data points about all of those companies that spend more than 10,000 a year. And
Yeah.
then what they would do is come into your customer list, map your customer list into that data set. And
Yeah.
then now that they know those 500 to 1,000 data points, they can then just look at who you already have and then find who's
More
most
of them.
similar
Right.
to already you
Exactly.
have, which kind of sounds like what you're talking about. It's fascinating stuff to me.
Yeah. These are some of the origins of quote big data, right? And some of the models that the likes of Google and Apple and Twitter base their revenue streams on is some of these old, like, it didn't really start in the 70s, but certainly 80s, 90s, and early 2000s database marketing, building cohorts, right? Where, like you said, a group of folks that fit there's 50 different profiles across this database of 1 million records. And along comes customer X with 10,000 more records to contribute, and we'll run the model of the 1 million up against their new group and say, oh, well, actually, you have people that fit into these cohorts, and here's the kind of marketing that works well for them. Yeah.
So what made you then want to leave the trendy world of big data, data science, and get into software implementations with those pesky human beings involved?
Yeah. Because growing up in the Bay Area, it would have been natural to maybe become an engineer of like interfaces in Silicon Valley, but that didn't happen for me, and that the main reason is I met a Colorado girl while I was in the Bay Area, and at that point in time, I'd actually done a little bit of ski instruction out in Colorado right after college before getting serious about a job, and leaving the Bay Area was one of the most appealing things to do, and that was 25 years ago. I've been here in Denver ever since. So I distanced myself from Silicon Valley, what might have been a trajectory, like you said, from a database marketing into some of the technology platforms in the South Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Instead, I got involved. I took the database marketing the next step and joined one of the big data originators, Equifax. They were looking for someone with my background, and they actually wanted to have me manage a team who they were professional service consultants for a data analysis package, a lot like the person you encountered on the airplane. We delivered those services to corporate customers like Whirlpool and LG. The same modeling of cohorts and how to increase the revenue streams for Whirlpool and LG and Samsung. That was a data service, and it was based on thousands of data points that Equifax had been collecting since Equifax was founded like 1899 or something ridiculous like that, or 1910. I just remember them talking about being a 100-plus-year-old company, but they had lots of data.
But you're getting more into getting people to use now a piece of software instead of just being in the background collecting data.
Right. So now my career trajectory is database marketing based, but now I am managing a team and helping them get better at delivering a software or a data analysis package for customers. And now, as you said, the pesky humans are involved, and that's when it really began to tap like a coaching background that I've always had. So at university, I used to guide sea kayaking and rafting trips to Mexico, British Columbia, out in the San Francisco Bay. So that teaching and coaching aspect was really appealing. I also taught sailing and windsurfing and other stuff for Club Med for a little while. And that coaching aspect started to come out in software. In delivering software, you've got to be a coach, you've got to be a teacher. And that was really appealing to have this technology platform and the analysis an engineer likes to do, and then the juice you get from as a coach or a teacher from watching someone learn something new. I was hooked, and I have been in software implementation ever since.
That's cool. So that almost then sounds like the explanation to why you would then go into ERP, because to me, ERP is just more complicated software implementations, bigger challenges, more interesting, pesky human problems. Is that a fair way to put it?
It totally is. It's a natural escalation that it started with just fairly, compared to an ERP, compared to a mid-market ERP like Acumatica, the data analysis and marketing solutions that we were targeting for Equifax, it's basically just CRM in ERP parlance. So it's this narrow slice. And then Blackbaud was addressing, it got quite a bit bigger. It got like an order of magnitude larger in that I got to encounter e-commerce platforms, the project management discipline associated with a 7-figure implementation budget, and so I got to expand e-commerce and donation management and grant management and direct mail management and email blasts. So now it's CRM and accounts receivable. And it was kind of a natural progression that when the chance to step into a full ERP that did everything for manufacturers, for private equity firms, for huge distribution companies, for field services. It looked like a playground. I didn't know much about it. I didn't come from a manufacturing background or an inventory management background, but I knew how to coach customers and consultants to be good at setting expectations with customers about how much work is ahead of them in implementing a complex piece of software.
I'm laughing right now because as you're describing that journey, here's the picture in my head. It's like when you're in this like data science trendy world, you're kind of floating in outer space, like this space exploration, Star Trek, cool, futuristic kind of a thing. And then you get pulled into Blackbot and you're getting more in orbit, the e-commerce side, then to the billing side, and then boom, you land on planet Earth. When you hit the ERP system, it's this grounded, product-centric manufacturing, 2 feet planted on the dirt type of a solution. That sort of seems like your path.
Yeah, and interesting. I like your analysis of kind of like floating around because it's appealing as a consultant, a coach, a project manager, and at times I've been a team lead with direct reports. Sometimes it's really appealing to go, gosh, people are just driving me nuts. I just want to deal with like a complicated query, which is just me against the data and the structure.
Right.
So I was thinking about like sometimes there's the luxury of not dealing with people, right? That's really appealing. But I never.
It's zero gravity. Yeah, you're just
zero
floating.
gravity. You float around. The only thing really buffering you or buffeting you is maybe a deliverable. You can't think around with this thing for 3 weeks. You got to fix it like tomorrow. So you're up against the timeline, but otherwise it's really just you and the data and whatever tools you have at your disposal. That's really appealing. That's the kind of floating around. And then you end up being grounded when maybe you're demoing something you think is so cool and the customer sends a really pragmatic question your way that just blows up your world. You're like, oh, you're right. It doesn't work for that, does it? And I thought it was so cool. Darn it. So
that's a great description of it.
That's how demos go, right? That you rehearse a demonstration. You're like, God, that's so cool that the product does this. Wow, I love that. And then you turn it around, and you show it to the customer, and they blow a hole in it. It's a fun dimension.
Yeah, I think you used the word earlier when describing a move from the Bay Area to Denver. You used the word practical in terms of the jobs now you were looking for, and I would use another word, and that is grounded. You're not in the ivory tower world of the Bay Area. You're now a little more grounded on planet Earth like the rest of us.
Yeah, and I love going back and visiting the Bay Area. Again, it's where Erin and I met. We're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this year.
Congrats.
But she, having grown up in Colorado, she was like, what would it take to get you to move to Colorado? Like, nothing. The Bay Area is lovely, beautiful, and ridiculously competitive. And it's not where I want to raise a family. So yeah, it's been really nice. And I have Midwest roots. Wisconsin and Michigan are where my folks are from, respectively. So Denver's a good blend.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what about what if we just skip the Summit 22 2022 part.
Totally
We
can.
got
Sure.
perspectives on previous episodes of that. I feel
Yeah.
like, especially that's why I like talking about background too, because I feel like it
Mm,
flows naturally into, all right, let's get real Acumatica stuff side of things.
sure.
The implementation methodology side of
Mhm.
things, especially with your background, when you approach an Acumatica implementation, maybe you could walk us chronologically through the Tom Ferris implementation methodology.
Right. And, I'm standing on the shoulders of PMP, Project Management, and Project Management Institute, which Acumatica, wisely kind of hits their wagon to when they started talking about, quote, the Acumatica implementation methodology. It's very standard project management. For me, the one of the greatest challenges is that who's our marketplace that we're typically going after with Acumatica. There's somebody who they don't. Some of them come from NetSuite and Oracle and SAP and stuff like that, but a lot of them have been growing so fast that their first QuickBooks and maybe QuickBooks Pro and then Fishbowl for inventory bolted on, and they haven't really gone through a full implementation of an actual mid-market ERP. And so setting expectations about how much testing really should be done to overcome the problems that we introduced into the business the first time around with the software that wasn't really ready to scale. That change management aspect, I love that part of helping customers. Sometimes it's grounding them in the work that they have ahead of them, teaching consulting teams, helping a project manager set those expectations, sometimes even involving a project manager during the sales cycle has been really valuable on large implementations. The idea is setting the stage for what does implementation look like and how much work is involved. And why does it take 4 to 6 months? Why are you quoting me the fact that I won't be live on Acumatica for a year based on all that you've heard? Setting those expectations, that's an appealing part of the challenge, Acumatica.
And in that initial part, so you actually you said the word standard in there. And I feel like that's a common way of looking at an Acumatica implementation. You hear it all the time, just giving me the standard, the out of the box, however you want to describe it. But I'm going to read. I'm not a project management institute guy myself, but I've heard a guy named Ed Kless talk about this stuff. And
Yeah,
so I just
sure.
Googled on their website real quick, and I think this is the definition
Yeah,
I've heard him read, which I think comes out of the PMBOK handbook. Is
that is
that right?
correct. Yeah.
So here's the definition of a project by them. A project is a temporary effort to create value through a unique product, service, or result. So 2 key words there, temporary, and the other one is unique. And you've got a standard approach to an ERP implementation, but talk us through how do you see the difference between having a standard, maybe skeletal structure, and the fact that you are delivering a project which is unique? How do you reconcile those standard and unique aspects of an ERP implementation?
Yeah, great question. The project management book of knowledge, the PMBOK. Very highfalutin. I love their self-generated labels for themselves, the PMI. All right, so not digressing. The standard versus the unique aspect, I think, is really well addressed, and this would go back to a common theme for me: how well this publisher, Acumatica, supports the channel. They don't compete with it, and the number of resources they provide. So a good example is of the implementation methodology and actually talking about the various options while still in pre-sales. We will actually leverage the fast start or quick start templates and say, customer, we could tackle your Acumatica ERP implementation in 3 or 4 months, and it would cost, say, $50,000 or $60,000, for example, if we follow very standard implementation methodology for your industry. You're a distributor, you're a discrete manufacturer, you are fairly out of the box or by the books field services plumbing entity that needs field services. So we could approach the implementation as kind of like small, medium, or large. That we could lead off with kind of industry standards and then adjust from there once you're live. That will get you live faster and cheaper, and then we could make modifications to the software later. Or we could not do a quick start and instead go through the expensive, time-consuming process of truly unique discovery and build something quite custom for you, right? Quote, custom out of the box. So standard versus something more customized or a hybrid is something we actually introduce in the sales cycle, and that we could deploy Acumatica, as sophisticated as it is, in kind of a standard way that would be faster and cheaper. Then we can build upon that, or we could spend more time conducting discovery before you are live on Acumatica and tailor it to your needs. So that's the primary reason, the primary way I would reconcile standard versus unique for Acumatica. And part of it's because the publisher provides some great tools.
Would you describe it maybe as the difference between fitting the business to the software versus fitting the software to the business?
Right. And we do ask that question, right, during pre-sales. What's your attitude, customer or potential customer, about adapting kind of common standards? Because we have implemented Acumatica 7 times for a business that looks a lot like you, versus you asking and being willing to pay for bending the software to your unique workflows. It's capable of either. The question is what you want and what you're willing to do. And you might say, I don't know, let's just take it as we go, in which case we're probably looking at a time and materials implementation.
So let's say I sign up, I buy Acumatica, I'm thinking standard. Then what's your first step? Expectations are high. I buy Acumatica. I think it's going to solve all of my problems and brew the coffee in the morning at our company. What's your first step in getting out of the sales mentality and into the trenches of the implementation?
Gotcha. Well, perhaps even before we've sold it to Rodman Incorporated, we will, during the pre-sales cycle, having shown how Acumatica is capable of doing all these things, we'll actually share a slide deck that introduces what is called the Kubler-Ross grief curve. And it's meant to shatter those very, very high expectations of like, well, I'm buying a new ERP and I've been dazzled by the pre-sales demos. So of course it's going to brew my coffee and top of manage my 3 warehouses worth of inventory without me blinking.
Kubler-Ross grief. Oh, this sounds interesting. Where can I read more about that?
Well, I mean, you could Google it. The Kubler-Ross grief curve does a great job of depicting change management. I'm in the dumps now because my legacy system and processes are painful. That's why I'm searching for an expensive ERP. And then I'm bedazzled by the demonstrations I've seen from talented pre-sales engineers. And I'm like, yeah. And my people are saying, yeah, that looks great. That solves everything. And it has cool dashboards and donut graphs. So sign me up. And this Kubler-Ross grief curve has been adapted by a lot of project management and even pre-sales resources to help burst that bubble, to say, well, hang on, you are definitely going to get there, but there's a process to get there. There's purchasing it, and then there's the time your team will spend in discovery. One version of this Kubler-Ross grief curve, it literally goes up, then it goes down, moving through time, and then it begins to climb back up. And the software, once you're finally live on it, will actually begin to approach meeting your expectations. But there's a trough, and we saw one version of it where it was literally called the trough of disillusionment. That your team doesn't have this ERP, you are paying for it, and your team has to do their job, plus they have to answer hundreds of questions from the consultants and participate in design. And you're like, how long is this going to last? Well, actually, it might last 2 or 3 months. And then you begin to climb out of it, and you get to test a little bit. You see your inventory master in the system, and you test a little bit. This Kubler-Ross grief curve does a great job of explaining what is the implementation lifecycle of a mid-market ERP like. What does it feel like to the customer?
That's really interesting. This is probably me just being weak on the project management side, but I had never heard anyone make that connection to ERP. But I was listening, actually, I was driving through the Colorado Rockies it was a couple years ago at this point. My dad passed away at the beginning of COVID, and I was listening to this like parental grief book while I'm driving through the Colorado Rockies. And I don't remember even what it was. I've tried to go back and find it, but I remember thinking as I was listening to it, they're describing project management or an ERP lifecycle. And it must have been the same kind of thing, but I'd never heard anyone else make the connection between the two. That's really interesting.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry for your personal loss, but what an interesting connection that you made, that you were listening from the other direction, truly from grief, and you were going, this actually sounds like the process for software implementation. Yeah.
I think it just means I'm way too into ERP is what it means.
Well, exactly. Once you're steeped in it, and and consultants who have not thought about project management, when they see this and then we talk about it, they go, "Oh yeah, you're right. That is putting words or a graph to what it really takes to get someone live on an ERP typically." Yep. Cool.
Well, I'll find an image or something and link to it at augforums.com/episode 72, dear listener, if you want a quick link, or you can do your own Google research. But sorry for the derailment there. Go ahead.
No, not at all. And if it builds, Tim, I'm happy to provide like a few kind of common resources out there to that.
That'd be great. Please do.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I would, if I could do anything on this, I'd like to, just continue to highlight how unique I consider this publisher, Acumatica. That having worked for a couple publishers, including on their professional services team, the fact that there's the Fast Start program, and at Acumatica Summit, they announced like it's getting its 2.0 or 3.0 revision later this year. It's just really impressive resources that support customers and implementers. And 7 years in now to Acumatica, dedicated to Acumatica, I'm impressed all the time by the efforts that they make. So.
And what's the deliverable on Faster? I've talked with Todd Coons a little bit, but is it a PDF file? Is it what's the physical representation of that thing?
Great question. Yep. So it's literally a snapshot that has the likes of 1 or 2 item classes set up for you to be able to start adding items right from the UI or on an import scenario. It's got a predefined generic chart of accounts, just like many of us might have seen in the sales demo snapshot. They have a manufacturing variant. They have a field services variant, where on average, this is a good place to start. How many item classes do you need? I don't know. Why not 1? Let's ask that. Could we get away with 1 item class and 1 posting class? So instead of taking hours to get the instance up and running to be able to show a customer how, all right, fine, let's buy a gadget, then turn around and sell it and ship it out. you can be showing them that process with their SKU in an hour or two, theoretically, if you drop that snapshot in. The other
Oh,
assets.
that's interesting. So it's an Acumatica snapshot file that I can load in and be up and running faster. I didn't realize that.
Yep. And it comes with the other assets that pair with that. You mentioned like a PDF. It actually comes with a statement of work that keeps an implementer, a VAR, from getting into hot water. It says, if you're going to go with a pure fast start and leverage this snapshot, here are the expectations that you need to fit into. That you don't have 17 warehouses where 5 of them are fed via automated transfers. You have one warehouse that you fulfill pretty much all orders and receive all inventory into. So it has a whole bunch of caveats to say, this is the very, very well-defined starter kit that you're getting with, and here are the assumptions it's built around. So it's, again, it's an impressive asset. I have not used the statement of work directly, but I have adapted it and even use it as a pre-sales tool to say, well, what would a standard versus kind of highly customized or unique implementation look like? Well, one would look like this, and the simple standard one that would get you live on Acumatica in 2 or 3 months would look like this. And you can build upon it.
And you mentioned that earlier about setting expectations. Do you have any tips on how you set expectations in a way that they can be remembered? Not for the sake of saying, aha, you told me in the pre-sales process that you don't do this, and now you're telling me that you do. But, not in that way, but in the sense of reminding, being able to bring back that conversation so they don't feel like you just surprise them, reconnecting once you're 2 months into the implementation and all of a sudden you hit this big road sign that tells you you're going off the trail. You have any tips on A, when you're back in the pre-sales process, and B, once you hit that road sign, how you tie those two worlds together for people, even visually, or, how you do that process?
Yeah. One of the most powerful ways to do that is to have a change management deliverable where you're literally talking to the C-suite, the folks who are going to write the check and make the final decision. Now, well, they may have allowed their operations folks to make the final decision, but they're the ones writing the check, and they're the ones who really need to remain advocates. A change management document can help set expectations and be a deliverable that you provide even before they buy it, maybe after having gone through a small discovery. And the change management document is something you can refer back to about, why did we build a project charter and plan like this versus a different variation? Well, because we talked about what we wanted to do early on. So having a change management or a project, sometimes it's called a project charter, is a way to have everybody not have to really finger point at one another, but instead point back to a common document that has everybody's signature on it. And it says that the CEO and the whole C-suite team is on board with this. And when a subject matter expert in inventory or in processes 1099s go, wait, this is not the system I want or need. We can go back to that change management or project charter that was developed together and say, there's a reason why we're not addressing that in phase 1. We're going to be addressing their unique 1099 reporting gadgets or processes or integrations as a phase 2. Yeah.
But even though it wasn't part of it, you already have a document in that initial document that outlines how you will approach if you come across these things. So it's not a surprise when you do.
Very good point. That the project charter's details will state things like, here are the 7 areas that we're definitely going to tackle as a phase 1. But we have identified the fact that 1099, fixed asset processes, and a true e-commerce integration are necessary for the business. We're just not trying to chew them off now. We will deal with them later. And so we're going to encounter users who say, well, my inventory controls, how do I define them without knowing the e-commerce? We have to do our best. And we decided that was our approach. And that's in writing. And so having a document that project managers, consultants on the VAR side, ISVs can refer to, and then of course the customer resources, including from the C-suite all the way down to the subject matter experts who are in the trenches with the consultants each day to refer back to, is just really, really valuable.
So I got a question on that, but before I do, quick time check. I know my fault, we got started a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. Are you able to go another 10, 15 minutes? Do you have another call coming up?
I do need to wrap up. Yeah, I've got a partner who's asking me for some input before they head on vacation.
Okay.
So
no problem.
Apologies.
Well, no, my apologies. Normally it's one take. Today was like take 4 before we were off and rolling. I want to ask on that. So I feel like there's 2 extremes. One extreme is it's over explained in a too long of a meeting. And then the other extreme is it's just a document that gets emailed and never talked about. Yeah. How do you strike a balance between people communicating versus documents communicating?
Right. That's a great question. So a good example of over explained and documented and yet not providing any value in my experience is the design document. In other words, after all the discussions and testing, putting what took place and what's implemented in the ERP itself and ready for testing or possibly even going live, and taking time to document all that is just round file, feeding the round file. it'll be
interesting. I like that.
Because I have spent, as a consultant and a project manager, spent hundreds of hours on documents like that on very large implementations, only to have the document never referenced again. So,
or not be true, right? Because someone checks a box after it gets created that makes it not true on page, 56.
Instantly outdated. It's instantly outdated. So it's a point in time document that provides some value. And then a minute after it's signed and archived, it's worthless. And no one comes back to it. So I approach that that paradigm of like over explaining versus overly documented with an emphasis on collaboration and a project management platform that doesn't go into too much detail, but goes into some, that is part of the project throughout the life cycle, means that these documents like a change management or a project charter or a risk register are living, breathing things that provide both the VAR, ISVs, and the customer value throughout the implementation. If we participate really well in a project collaboration platform together, it becomes this massive knowledge base about why did we implement 4 different item classes. We could have done 43 item classes, but we settled on 4 because we tested and documented together. Having a project collaboration platform that we come back to literally on a daily basis. It's where we record our time. It's where customers upload documents to us. That helps keep some of those governing documents relevant and top of mind and more valuable. They're not just an email. They're actually in a living project record.
I feel like I hear 2 things there. One is less is more. And the second thing is that you're focused less on the how and more on the why. And the how, it's whatever Acumatica is configured as, but the why allows you to, that's the important part of the discussion.
Yeah. And why, if there isn't a why, then always lean on less is more. Having a work breakdown structure that has hundreds of nodes is only valuable if there's a why behind it. So you can actually manage a very large project with just 15 different buckets of time, possibly. And then you'd only go down deeper than 15 or 20 different kind of line items to a project as necessary. I definitely like less is more. And I've certainly, as a project manager, made the mistake of overcomplicating a project. It was a $1,000 project. So why not carve it up into the 100 or 200 little bits that it is? It drove everybody nuts. So I definitely, very intuitive of you that you caught the less is more. Yeah, I concur.
Well, that's cool. I feel like we could pick up a part 2 maybe at some point. I'll let you get to your next meeting, but thanks
That would
for.
be delightful. I think having a part 2 on implementation methodology and change management, and project management for Acumatica, that'd be fantastic. Sometime in Q2 or Q3, that'd be fun.
Sounds good. We'll get it on the calendar. Well, hey,
Thanks.
thanks for taking the time today, and have a great weekend.
You're a fantastic host, sir. Thank you. You have a great weekend too. Bye.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of augforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.